Yeah, good. So let's just have a bit of a conversation, and then, because it's really good to have the opportunity to hear about your journey and the experiences you've had, and then we can come to some reflections about what you think would be helpful in a mental health system in the future. So I guess when I read your witness statement, sounds like the events that happened when you were a 16-year-old were pretty profound for not only you, your dad and mum and your sister, I think, as you were explaining it in terms of this. So can you just talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was going along as any other 16-year-old would, and I feel like the biggest aspect that knocked me back was like how sudden it happened. Like my dad seemed to be fine just even the day before, and waking up that morning and realizing that he was low enough that he couldn't see his place in the world anymore was such a huge shock. And then the kind of domino effect, how it affected my mum, my sister, and in turn myself as well. And then even like our extended family, it just continued out like a ripple effect.
Yeah, I think you described very dramatically that moment when you found your dad's note, that his suicide note that he'd left behind, and where you and your family thought he might have killed himself, and obviously had to get the police and others involved. That must have been a very terrifying moment for you all.
Yeah, it definitely was.
And you said before that, though, there was no sign, you hadn't been worried about your dad. No one had been really conscious that he was in the depths of despair that he clearly was.
No, it just seemed that he was incredibly busy at work, had extended hours, and was always on his phone for work purposes. And we never really questioned that.
Yes. And so it must have been amazing after the police and everyone was involved, and then your dad had to be hospitalised. Was that the first time he'd ever been in a mental health facility that you were aware of?
Yes, that's correct.
And so he had quite a long stay there, I think, in terms of that time. You said it was he was in hospital for quite a long period of time, and visiting was pretty traumatic for you and your family.
Yeah, there's especially one visit that remains really vivid in my mind, and that was when my mum actually carried my sister out of the waiting room because she just couldn't walk. She was absolutely hysterical. And it was just, you just never knew what you were going to get when you went there. Like there were people that kind of were banging their heads against the wall and yelling various things. And I think the one thing that like held me on and kept me going was that I actually got to see that he was still alive and that he was actually still physically here. That's the reason that I kept going.
Yes. And how often would you go and visit your dad in hospital?
About 2 to 3 times a week, depending on what our schedules were like, because mum was trying to balance myself, my sister and my brother, and then her best friend was murdered only a few days after my dad tried to take his life too. So there was a lot going on for her. I don't really know how she did it, to be honest.
Yes, and I think that sounded pretty amazing how everything came in a storm together. And I guess I got the sense then that you had to really step up as a young person and take on, or did you feel the need to take on that added responsibility for looking out for everyone?
Yeah, I definitely felt that need. And I think that I kind of confirmed that in my mind when I had a note from Dad saying that I was the rock of the family. I really took that on literally. And thought I had to step up for my sister, my brother, and especially my mum too.
Yes.
I feel like looking back, I didn't really have many boundaries. And I think just kept giving and giving and giving. So I didn't really have much left for myself at that point.
And we also heard from many people in your sort of experience this thing called hypervigilance. So you always were tense and aware, conscious of how everyone was going. Is that an experience that you had about it? And you've described it a bit in terms of this, but just how that felt for you, needing to take on being the rock of the family?
Oh, it was quite stressful. I felt like I was kind of in flight mode most of the time. And like I couldn't really be really present and grounded in any given moment. I think I was just constantly waiting for the next thing and thinking about what I could do next. Yeah, always go, go, go. Yeah.
And so you said, though, at that time when your dad was in hospital, you and your mum and siblings learned a bit about not only his gambling problems, but also his childhood trauma. So can you talk to me a little bit about those two things?
Well, in terms of the childhood trauma, it happened when he was 10. And it turns out that his older brother was also traumatized as well, and was in turn kicked out of the house. So, yeah, there was a perpetrator that said to my dad, "Don't tell your family, they won't believe you," just like what happened to your brother. So in turn, he repressed that.
Yes.
And then the gambling, he said, started to gamble when he started to have flashbacks of this childhood trauma as a way to kind of cope with it. And yeah, it ended up being just a few bets on a horse or a dog, and then it ended up being, we'll take out of the house mortgage and out of his own super, and it just ended up becoming really extreme. I think the more fear and the more memories were coming back, the more he had to bet to kind of try to keep on top of it, in a sense.
And when he was involved in hospital and then in the facility he went to after the acute unit, how involved were the professional staff in explaining to you and your family about your dad's mental health and the issues that he was facing? Did you get a lot of help and guidance about how to understand that?
Not particularly. I remember Mum was getting calls to see how she was, but we never really got much more information than that. And I recall her saying that she was just really trying to find some support for even being a partner of someone that has an addiction. She was trying to Google it and just find her own resources, but was getting quite lost along the way too.
So it doesn't sound like there was a lot of, there was the follow-up and checking, but not necessarily educating or really engaging with you about how to understand your dad's mental health and the issues that he was facing.
Yeah, that's correct.
So I guess that probably added to your sense of the responsibility you had in terms of trying to support him too during that phase of time. And you were still at school then, so you did say, though, there was help for you at school, and that was really important.
Yeah, I actually went back to school the day after he tried to take his life. I feel like for me it was probably a bit of avoidance, just wanting to try to find some normality within the situation. But I recall about 2 weeks back at school, and I just had so much anger and frustration that I was holding inside of me, and Mum actually came into school and sat me down with the support team there and got me linked up with one of the counsellors, which was one of the best things that she could have done for me at that time.
So what year would you have been in at school then?
Year 10.
Year 10, yeah. And what year would your sister have been in?
Year 8.
And you said she spent a little bit more time away from school than you did, so she wasn't ready to go back to school. But did she also engage with a counsellor at that time?
She didn't really want to talk much at the time. I think she wanted to be at home and be with Mum.
When you reflect back, was suicide talked about much at that time? In your world that you were in, with your school, other people, was it very much the subject of discussion or not really back then?
So that brought up that discussion at school as well, and my friend and myself were huge supports for one another at that time. But that was probably the first time I'd actually even really discussed it or even thought about mental illness, really.
Right. And so, gosh, it sounds like, for your mum, the horrendous experience with her best friend, and then all of these events all seem to sound like they came crashing down at much the same time. It would have been, I can understand why you were in fight or flight mode for a lot of that time. It must have been incredibly intense for you. Yeah. And so seeing the counsellor, that was, you say, was a really helpful thing for you. Can you just talk to a little bit about why it was important and what you found helpful out of that?
I think number one was the anger. There was a lot of anger and resentment building within me, especially towards my dad. I just couldn't understand why he didn't want to be in this world anymore. And I think I was looking at it in quite an ego mindset, thinking like, oh, he would have left me, he would have left the family.
Yeah.
Rather than actually reflecting on what his personal state must have been at the time. And she just really allowed me to have that time and space to actually begin to process it, and begin to kind of gain my own understanding of the situation too. She really helped me also build my self-worth from like I was down here, and she kind of helped me help myself build that back up too over the years. I saw her till the end of year 12, so it was a long relationship. Yeah,
that's pretty amazing. And how often would you see her at the beginning, for example?
About 2 times a week. And she also let my teachers know that if I needed to kind of be excused from class to come to the room, to let them know, which was amazing. So
so fabulous. And I mean, that sounds like it was an incredibly important and thing for you. The fact that it was the same person that you saw throughout that time, how important was that you had that relationship? I think you talked about the need to trust her and become ready to talk about how you were really feeling, and to let her help you to try and get those tools.
Yeah, I think, the consistency was a huge factor. I think especially a lot of my trust, I had walls up from as soon as Dad tried to take his life. It took a long time for me to learn to trust, or begin to trust him again, let alone anyone else. And I think, the fact that it was her the whole way through was a huge important factor for me, because I don't know if I could have actually retold it again and again and again.
Yes. Yes. So the pain that you experience in going through that, we hear that from so many people, that, that having to retell your story is very, very difficult for people, particularly when it's been associated with major trauma, which yours clearly was, the fear that you described and how devastated you and your siblings and mum were at the time. It must be very powerful and can be very triggering, those sort of things too, when you're having to explain it and tell it back to people. So what did she do that you found, how did you talked about she built your self-esteem up over time. How did she do that?
She even introduced the aspect of self-care to me, which was incredibly powerful, because as I said, I was giving and giving and giving, but I wasn't even giving to myself. I forgot about myself in the process. So empowering me to actually choose me again, and to think about what I wanted out of life and how to support others that have those healthy boundaries too.
Yeah.
Because that was really huge.
I think the boundary issue is really important. So can you talk to me a little bit more about that? Because I think that, for young people, when they are thrust into a caring and being, as you described, the rock of your family very early, how you can be a young person and be that is the challenge about both parts of your life. So can you talk a little bit about how she helped you to understand boundaries?
She even reminded me that with Dad, I could give and give and give, but ultimately he would make his own choices as well.
Yeah.
That was a huge thing for me, because I was thinking the more I give, the more I can kind of influence how he behaves or what he does.
Yeah.
Rather than me being like, well, actually I can support him, I can be there for him. But at the end of the day, he's got to make those choices for himself too.
Yeah.
I think remembering that, everyone has their right to be whatever they will be, and kind of honouring that within yourself too.
And I think it was you gave a powerful example where you talked about, thinking you had to check whether your dad was gambling, check whether he was taking his medication, all of those sort of things about having to check that he was on the right track was, I guess, also part of the sense of responsibility and probably the fear about what you were dealing with. So can you just talk to me a little bit about what that involved and what that felt like for you.
Yeah, I still remember my sister coming into my room one night and saying, I think Dad's been gambling again, and we'd sneak into our parents' bedroom and check his phone, and there'd be websites there that he had been. It was really sad to feel like you kind of had, like you felt like you had to do that, and that in turn comes back to the whole trust thing too.
Yeah.
And feeling like kind of have to try to control the situation. I think just ultimately just really sad. Because like it's your dad, you kind of feel like you want to be the child, not the parent. But I felt like the roles were kind of reversed for a while there.
And I think that's certainly what we hear of young carers about. They really love and care for their parent, but that role reversal that you're talking about, but it also can create some resentment also on the part of the person and the parent. So how did your dad react in that sort of environment?
Well, generally we'd tell Mum and even not tell him, so he would get upset that we'd kind of been invading his privacy. And I think like it must have been hard for him, because I think he even felt like he was being parented not just by us but by like Mum, like his own partner too. That's an interesting aspect to look at as well, because she took charge of the like the financial side of things.
Yes.
So he didn't really have much left for himself, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess that's where mental illness and acute distress and other addictions, change roles and responsibilities and can disrupt roles and responsibilities in families for a time. Did you ever have family therapy or all of the family together talking about and having counselling or anything like that?
We had one session together, but we never went back again. It was with a psychologist that my dad was seeing. He suggested that it could be beneficial for all of us.
Yes.
But after that session, my siblings said they didn't want to go back again. Myself and my mum and dad were quite keen on it, but we wanted to make sure that everyone was in the same boat if we were going to go ahead with it.
Yes, yeah. It's quite the challenge, isn't it? Getting everyone to feel as comfortable, and each person responds slightly differently. And you said that you remember that your sister found some of this particularly distressing, and that sense of responsibility. And she herself became quite despondent at one stage, you say. So when that happened, was the family aware of how serious that was at that point in time with your sister?
Yeah, my mum took her into the hospital on numerous occasions, on nights where they didn't know what else to do. I remember my dad going for drives with her even at 2 a.m, 3 a.m. in the morning, because she'd want to talk to him. She saw a few counsellors for a while there, but in particular she had a boyfriend who he actually told my mum and dad about her self-harm. He was the one that actually disclosed that. He was the first person she opened up to. So I thought we're very grateful that he was able to let us know about that, because I think she didn't know how to tell us, she said.
Because she felt guilty about it or didn't want to add to your distress.
I think she did feel quite guilty, and felt like, especially with Mum, that she already had enough on her plate. I think because my mum and I actually discussed it, and my sister had quite a unique relationship to my dad, and my mum said since she was little she kind of had him up on a pedestal in a sense. And Mum just described it as she thinks that he actually just really broke her heart the day that he tried to take her life. And she isn't a big talker either, so I'm a big believer in, if you can't express things, they come out in one way or another. I think that's the point that she got to at that time.
She's more inclined to bottle things up and keep them inside. And so obviously, when you think about all of that and then managing it, she also did get into service, and you said she got involved with Headspace, and that was a helpful thing for her. Okay, and so then when you think about all of that, and you coming through, what do you think was so important for you to be in the place that you were able to manage all of that? Some of it will have been your own resilience and capacity to really stay strong in the face of it, but what did you draw upon, do you think, in terms of helping you to manage in the way that you have?
Oh, I think especially that school counsellor and the unlimited sessions that we were able to have.
Yes.
I have heard that that could potentially be changing in the near future, and I think if that was me and I only had 6 sessions,
Yes.
I would have just gotten to the point where I'd be able to trust her. And I don't know how I would have gone if I got told, oh, sorry, you'll have to go see someone else.
Yes.
I think at that stage would have been all a bit too much for me.
So what did you do when you left school? What did you do in terms of then getting other support when you needed it?
Well, my grandma passed away 2 years ago now, and as soon as she started to get ill, because she was diagnosed with bile duct cancer, I went and saw a psychologist. That brought up a bit of emotions in me. So I saw that psychologist up until she passed, actually, and that was a huge help for me. I haven't seen anyone else since then. I've been doing a lot of self-development courses with the Centre for Healing.
Yes.
One of the things they actually mentioned is, well, as we were speaking about before, with the re-traumatize. Like I said, every time you speak about traumas you've endured, you actually do trigger that within you again, and it kind of brings up the story into your mind like you're living it.
Yes.
So a lot of that sort of self-development has really helped me as well, just continuing to get to know myself on a deeper level and choose where I go from here.
Yes. And I also gather from what you were just saying too, you know, just the fact that you had the insight to know when to reach out when your grandma was getting sick, you know, that's a big, you know, having that capacity to say, okay, prepare yourself for something that's going to be difficult. Do you think the very positive experience you had with your psychologist at school made you open to being prepared to reach out for help when you've needed it?
Yeah, I definitely think so.
Yeah. And so with that, can you just explain a little bit more so I understand what it is that you're doing now? So what was that program that you're saying you're involved with?
They call it the Denna Healing.
Yeah.
They're located in the city. I'm not entirely sure where, but a lot of their courses are online.
Yeah.
This particular program is called Going Deep, and yeah, it covers trauma, identity. It's a really big self-reflection course, and you even go on to actually learn. They call it root cause therapy.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's, you know, loving the alternative methods of healing these days.
And you're doing it online?
Yes, that's correct.
I noted because you did say when your dad was in hospital or in the transition facility, I think it might have been, where you did a lot of wellness activities like yoga and meditation, that you thought that sort of healing was also very important. And so it sounds like you have been interested in looking at other forms of intervention as well as counselling.
Yes, that's definitely true.
Yeah, and your own personal growth and development. So when I look at that and you say to us in terms of that, clearly that's been an important part of you and your poetry and the range of other things that you've been encouraged to explore. So can you talk to me a little bit about that self-care, because you described your self-care flower, which I thought was a fabulous example of something that you've done that's given you a lot of comfort over time. So can you describe that for me?
Yeah, it was funny because that self-care flower I actually made when I was seeing my counsellor at school too. So yeah, each petal represents a different aspect of self-care. So I had like this physical, emotional, spiritual, just all different aspects. And say like for physical, it could be going for a walk or having a hit of tennis, and yeah, for spiritual, it could be writing some poetry, journaling, And as I've grown over the years, I've added to it as well, because as the years go by,
So that's a very powerful thing that you've been using in terms of being able to manage that. So it's still there, a part of, you're saying you still use it even today and you add and develop it. So that's obviously very important for you.
Yeah, very important.
Fantastic. So now when you think about what you've done on your journey since you were 16 and now the work that you're doing and what you want to go on to do, you've clearly been involved in quite a lot of, you've done different things in terms of your younger adult life. So can you just describe a little bit about where your aspirations are now?
Next month, I'm actually going to start studying a Bachelor of Social Work, which I'm really excited about.
That's very exciting.
And I'm wanting to travel more. I have travelled to South Africa, hoping once the borders open again to Tanzania, Kenya, do some work over there. Definitely run my own program one day. That's a big aspiration of mine, which I've started facilitating this year with Flourish Girl, empowering young women, which I'm really excited to hopefully be involved in a few programs in term 3.
And so you talked, how did you get involved with that? Because I thought that was fabulous. You said you were also involved with the Satellite Foundation and you'd been on the Headspace Youth Advisory Committee. So how did you start getting involved in all of these different activities?
Well, the Headspace Youth Advisory Committee was the first, kind of organisation I was involved with. And on the last day that I saw my counsellor from school, she gave me the flyer for the Headspace Advisory Committee, which I'm very, very grateful for. She just gave it to me and said, I thought this might be something you'd be interested in. I've had some beautiful friends from that. In turn, I found Satellite, which I'm still involved with today, which that's like camps, programs. I think we're looking at even beginning a podcast soon for young people too.
Good, fantastic.
Now Flourish Girl, which was just at the start of this year. So I was following Flourish Girl Instagram for about 2 years.
Yes, I saw that.
I'd always look at it and think, I'd love to do that one day. And then they put a post up saying we're looking for facilitators, and I basically applied straight away for the phone interview and got accepted. So Mandy's been an amazing mentor for me too. And
so what does a facilitator with Flourish Girls do?
We hold space for young girls to be empowered and feel really accepted and step into who they really want to be. And I think it changes depending on what the girls need on the day too. So Mandy was saying some days we might talk about family issues, some days it might be body image. It depends on what the girls feel they want to talk about as well, which I really, really like.
And so getting involved with those things, you said you didn't hear about something like the Satellite Foundation providing support for young carers until you were 19. So clearly, and then you just happened upon that and became aware of it. And I guess that's one of the things we're very interested in, because we hear too often that people don't know about what supports are out there at the time they might need them. So how did you come across the Satellite Foundation?
Became friends with someone from Spoken Word actually. One of her parents has a mental illness and she'd been involved with Satellite and mentioned to me, I think you might be interested in this. And I did their Young Leader program and was able to help run a camp with about 40 young people late last year, which was amazing.
And so how were the young people selected to go on that camp, and what was involved in what you did there?
I think some of them touched base with Satellite, but also Satellite reaches out to different hospitals as well and different community centres and works with their social workers and their connections there too, to engage with young people as well. Like I did I went to Shepparton at the end of last year and facilitated a photography workshop with some young people. So they've got that connection with that community centre as well. Like there was some kids at the camp that got flown down from Mildura. So reaching out to really rural spots as well, which is much needed.
And you've obviously felt pretty comfortable after the training that you'd done to be able to do that sort of work. And now what you're also doing with Flourish Girls. So is in terms of, you obviously like that, like participating in and working with other people some of whom will have had similar experiences to you.
Yeah, I definitely do. I feel like it's really powerful to be able to help other people by using lived experience and just being able to connect with them too, and gaining new perspectives from them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that network that you said, you've become good friends with some of the people that you've met through both Headspace Advisory Committee and various other things, the social connection, because we often hear about the loneliness that there is associated with being involved in the mental health system and having family members who are that. Yeah, that's so. How important do you think is having social connection with others with lived experience, or people who understand what that feels like to have been through some of the experiences you've had?
Oh, it's definitely important, because I feel like you can have someone listen to you, say a friend that hasn't experienced that, and it can mean a lot, but to be able to actually talk with someone that can resonate and really understand where you're coming from is, there's no words to describe it, I don't think.
Yeah, and we're certainly hearing so much about the importance of lived experience, that what that means for the person who's got a mental illness, and the strength that they can get from dealing with others with lived experience, but also for carers, how important it is for people to also have that understanding. And so with what you're doing with Flourish Girl, can you talk to me a little bit about what the facilitation role is that you might play with them?
I think it might be in schools, hopefully for term 3. If not, I think online. It just depends on restrictions at the time.
Yeah.
But I think there'll be about, because I think one of the groups is 150 young girls, so we'll have about 10 of us on the site that day. And I think because I haven't had any facilitation experience as of yet, I'll kind of go there and observe the first 1 or 2 times that I'm there.
Yes.
And at the moment, we're actually doing facilitator training online, which has been amazing in learning the ropes of how Flourish Girl works as well.
So we're really interested in, I guess, in COVID, a lot of stuff's had to happen online, but you talked now about a few things you've done, both in terms of the course that you've been doing yourself, and now how do you find the online medium in terms of both your own personal development, but engaging and learning those skills?
There's some aspects I love and some aspects that I don't particularly like. I think if it was possible, I'd just love to be able to have those facilitator trainings in person.
Yeah.
But I do love the fact that with Zoom you can actually see each person and see their expressions when they talk and hear the tone of their voice. So I'm really grateful for the fact that we can use those platforms.
And you talked about the course that you were doing. I'm sorry, I've just forgot the name of it that you did.
Healing.
Yeah. How did you find that course? And was that all largely online?
That was another organisation I found on Instagram.
Yeah, good on you.
I follow lots of really inspirational people on there, actually.
And so how long was that course that you did with them?
Each topic goes for about an hour, and it's self-paced, so you could finish it in 1 week if you wanted to. I've just been doing one topic a week and doing the tasks for the following week, and I think I'll go back and revisit it all as well.
So it sounds like you've been very, since you've left school, been very keen to engage in a whole range of things that stretch you a bit, that challenge you to focus on those things, and now you're about to embark on social work. In terms of, how did you choose social work as your next area that you wanted to focus on?
I was tossing up between a few different courses for a while, because I completed my diploma of counselling at the start of 2018, and I just kept thinking about the programs that I'd love to run. And I was looking more into occupational therapy, then mental health nursing. And yeah, with CSU, I read up about their Bachelor of Social Work and what the possible outcomes could be, and especially when it said work overseas, that really excited me. And yeah, even just the range of people you can work with, I think that really, really stood out to me and made me think this is something I can see myself doing.
Okay, so you're saying you start next week? Did you, or next month? When was it?
Next month, yeah.
Yeah, right. Wow, that's a fantastic thing. But you also said that you'd been volunteering for a foster care agency, and that had underscored a bit about, no, you were working there, weren't you, as a casual job, about children's experience of abuse and sexual abuse and childhood trauma. And so, what have you taken out of that work that you've been doing?
Well, that slowed down a bit at the start of this whole COVID situation.
Yeah,
But yeah, the exciting thing is I actually had a call just yesterday, actually, and I've got, for the next month, I've been given 12 hours a week to work with these young people again and re-engage in the organisation. I just love the fact that with our training, they said, at the end of the day, as support workers, we're here to treat these kids as kids. Yes. They want to be treated like, as any other kid would be. And yes, they've been through a lot of trauma, but like, we don't want to define them by that either.
Yes.
I found that really powerful as well, because I think in the midst of it all, you can think, oh, this has happened to them, that's happened to them, but it is true. It's like at the end of the day, they're still a human, and they still just want to be loved regardless of all that.
So it sounds like, even though you've been on this journey caring and being in a caring role, has still been something really important, and that will extend into the career you're choosing to pursue in social work and the human services field. So that's obviously, notwithstanding the challenges that you had at that age of 16 and those very traumatic events, you seem like you've maintained that commitment, but balance about how you want to take on that caring role in a different way going forward.
Yeah,
so can you talk a little bit to me then about your use of the written and spoken word, because obviously that's also been an important outlet for you and is part of your identity and sense of self. So I watched your video with great interest. So can you talk to me about that a little bit?
I feel like spoken word has been a really important outlet for me, definitely. And it's allowed me to be able to express myself in a way that I haven't felt I always have been able to. I think that's what's really resonated with me a lot. And I think every time I step up there, I always get nervous.
Yes,
but
I'm sure.
always love the conversations that come with the people in the community after the pieces, because I feel like you just feel like you've really been seen and that you've been heard.
Yes.
And that what you're experiencing is valid. And I think that's really what everyone wants at the end of the day. To be able to be a part of that community means so much to me as well.
And so in terms of how that's all organised through that community, can you explain a little bit about to me how that's done?
So they have monthly spoken word nights, and they've been amazing, and have actually been holding fortnightly spoken word nights online during this time too.
Yeah, good.
It's been wonderful. And we've got a worker, some part of an arts group, and our kind of manager of that, he really helped kind of gain ground for spoken word and really advocated for their monthly nights. It's really, really wonderful.
So we've been hearing a bit of it from people about the importance of the arts having a greater contribution to the mental illness and mental health debates and discussion, and also removing a lot of stigma around some of these issues. So do you share that view, that it's a helpful way to have the discussion?
Definitely. Yeah.
So both personally important and empowering, but also helps more broadly in creating that awareness. So what is slam poetry? I mean, I just read and heard your poem. Why is it called slam poetry?
I know with slam poetry, some people actually have like kind of, I guess like not a rap battle, but like a spoken word battle where they kind of go back and forth.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't really been to any of those with spoken word. Yeah, I think because it can even be like a song. I think I described it in my statement as like life in motion.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, 'cause anyone can get up and like say whatever they feel like they want to say in that moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just like really just vulnerable authentic self-expression.
Yeah. And you said it was pretty amazing the night you decided to share your family story. You said your adrenaline was pumping, and that must have been an amazing thing, but the reaction was pretty powerful.
Yeah, I'd actually was driving home I was working traffic control at the time, so I had like my traffic gear on, all my high vis outfit, and like I worked night shift earlier that week, and I'd actually was on my dinner break and just felt really inspired to just type up my family's story. And on the way home, I was a little bit tired, but I thought I'll drop into the spoken word night, and they have a thing called open mic, so halfway during the night, anyone can write their name down if they feel like they'd like to share that night. So I did that, and yeah, I got up and read our story off my phone, and I was just amazed at how many people came up and hugged me and even said thank you. Like that's really resonated with me, and even shared some of their own personal experiences as well.
Yeah.
And I just see how someone actually stepping up and being courageous and sharing vulnerably can just open the door for really powerful conversations to be had as well.
Yeah, so you must have, after that, been so pleased that you took the opportunity to do that and get that response from people. You're probably very exhausted when you finish driving home in your high-vis gear.
I was so nervous too. As soon as I started walking up, I was thinking, what have I done?
Yes, I'm too late now. You've got to go through with it, isn't it? So the last thing you said in your witness statement was in terms of aspiration for the future, and just one of the important things you said was about more knowledge about what would have been available would have been really helpful for you. Can you just talk to me a little bit about that? Because obviously it sounds like your mum was Googling, everyone was trying to find out about things, but a lot you found about very late after the event. So can you talk about why you think that's important in a mental health system?
I think even for the family and friends' mental health as well. Because I know mum would stay up to like 1 or 2 a.m. Googling what she was Googling, for example. I felt like I had no idea what dad was experiencing, or even about Satellite Foundation. I'm just thinking if there was like a platform that I could have turned to that just listed, even had different subcategories that I could have actually looked into, that would have made a world of a difference for me.
And I think that we've certainly heard the mental health system is so complex and difficult for people to navigate, finding out what's there and what the supports are. And certainly we've met many people, including way too many young carers who haven't been able to find out about what support is available. And so that's something we're certainly looking at. And clearly we know that people will go online in the first instance in many occasions to try and find that. Yeah. You also said that you thought that embracing creativity and mental health, those things that you've talked about and the endless possibilities that you see in terms of that, you then went on to talk about the need for consistent support and funding. So can you just talk a little bit about what you think also is going to be important in a future mental health system that we're trying to establish here?
I think in terms of the consistent support, even how some sessions will go down to say even 10 a year.
Yeah.
I know that's what I had with the psychologist I saw with my grandma, and it was really hard to think, well, how am I going to space that? How will I know when to have these sessions? And even, with the funding, my mum didn't see anyone for quite a while, like when my dad was in hospital, because she just couldn't afford it. Like we were left with, I think, $2 in the bank
Yes, you
She
said
didn't even know
that.
how she was going to buy us like bread or anything for breakfast. So yeah, I think like being able to have easy access for people no matter what situation you might be in.
Yes, yeah, and that was quite powerful when you said that about, you know, the having $2 left in the bank and the worry of everything that had happened at that time. And I think that point you made about how you use your counselling, and many of people have talked to us about how difficult it is to think about if there's a cap and a limit on the sessions. How do you space it over the time, but also potentially get the intensive help you might need at the beginning? And I think probably you've talked so much about building that trust with your counsellor, and how important that was and how that takes time to do that. And certainly we're hearing about that all the time in terms of why that's important for people.
And I think especially if you're getting handballed again and again, then that traumatization, how that impacts people's mental health too.
Yes.
Or they have to speak about the same thing over and over. I think that mental health will start to deteriorate more too.
Yes, good. Is there anything else, Denna, that you think is important for us to think about when we're designing a better response to mental health issues going forward and for the system?
I think definitely having like an online, I don't know if it's like a website or portal, just with everything kind of mental health related, I guess. So like there's this one, like how we have MyGov, like have like this mental health portal that people can access, and easily find information and creditable information as well about what they might be experiencing or numbers that they can contact. And I think because for a lot of time when you're in that situation under that amount of stress, the last thing you want to try to do is try to find different numbers and websites, that sort of thing. So if it could be easily accessible, I think that would make a huge difference.
And do you think it would have made a difference? Have you ever talked to your dad about what he would think would have made a difference for him in terms of getting help earlier?
I think it was hard for him because he also bottles his feelings up like my sister too. And he openly said when he was seeing psychologists, he wouldn't really tell them everything that was going on. So I think for him, like alternative therapy might have actually worked better. Like he's tried, actually linked him with one of our practitioners from Key Assets who practices tapping. He actually had a session with my dad and he quite liked that. So I think Dad said like even when he was at that transition house with the yoga and the meditation, that was really helpful at that time too. So I guess rather than just directly being linked to a psychologist or counsellor, maybe having those other options to look at too to see what he's interested in.
Yeah, I think and certainly we're conscious that talking therapy works for some people, but others would like a different medium. So it's something to think about. How do you make sure that's available and can be the means for people to engage? So that's a helpful reminder too about what other therapies and interventions there are that are there. So thank you very much for being prepared to share that amazing journey you've been on with me and your reflections. It's been very powerful. It was very powerful for me to read your witness statement and then hear your poem, and to meet with you now has been fabulous. So thank you very much. I know it takes a lot for all of the people who are sharing with us. It's a big decision they make to do it, and it takes a lot to share in this way, but it's really helpful for us because it means we as a commission have all of our thinking ground in people's lived experiences and their suggestions. And we have said from the Royal Commission's point of view, we do see lived experiences being critical to our future system design, both those who are living with mental illness, but also carers and family members. So that's something that's been incredibly helpful, and hearing from young carers has been particularly important for us. So congratulations on where you're at in terms of what you're about to do too. I mean, it sounds like you're still leading a very, very full and diverse life, and things seem to be going pretty well for you at the moment.
Yeah, thank you for holding space today and for our discussion. It's definitely important.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.